The sound of hoofbeats was the sound of death coming for them. Josephine Turner's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She pulled her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, tighter against her chest, the small body trembling like a trapped bird. They were crammed behind the crumbling wall of an old, abandoned barn, the rotting wood digging into Josephine's back. This was supposed to be a safe place, a forgotten place, but nothing was safe anymore. "Mama, why are we hiding?" Emma's whisper was a tiny thread of sound in the heavy afternoon air. "Hush, baby," Josephine breathed, her own voice tight with fear. Her eyes were glued to a narrow gap between the wood slats. Through it she could see the dust cloud kicked up by the approaching horse. It could be anyone, a lost traveler, a local ranch hand, or it could be him, the man she'd been running from for 6 long months, the man who had promised to find her no matter where she went. The hoofbeats slowed, the frantic gallop easing into a cautious walk. Josephine held her breath, her lungs burning. A tall figure on a chestnut stallion came into view. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, pulled low, shadowing his face. A long duster coat billowed around him, making him seem larger than life. He was a cowboy, but not one she recognized, and that was almost worse. The devil you know is better than the one you don't. "Hello?" The stranger's deep voice rolled across the empty yard. "Anyone around here?" Josephine flattened herself against the barn, trying to will both herself and her daughter into invisibility. They had been on the road for days, their money almost gone, their hope dwindling with every mile. This abandoned homestead was meant to be a brief respite, a place to catch their breath before pushing further west. She should have known. She should have known there was no such thing as a safe place. Emma squirmed, and a single tiny pebble broke loose from the dirt floor. It skittered across the ground, the sound impossibly loud in the tense silence. The cowboy's head snapped toward the barn. Josephine's breath caught in her throat, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. He knew. "I know someone's there," he called out, his voice calm, steady. He swung down from the saddle with a fluid grace that spoke of a life spent on horseback. "I mean you no harm." He started walking toward them, his steps measured and confident. "This is Hartwell land. I'm just checking on the property." Hartwell. The name was unfamiliar, but the man's confident stride told her he wasn't lying. He wasn't the man she feared, but he was a complication she couldn't afford. They were trespassing. They were caught. With a deep, shuddering breath, Josephine knew she had no choice. She had to face him. "We'll be on our way," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she stepped out from the shadows, pushing Emma behind her skirts. "We didn't realize this land belonged to anyone." The cowboy stopped dead in his tracks. Surprise flickered across his face as he took in the sight of them. A woman, thin and worn, and a child clutching her mother's patched dress. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30. A strong jaw was covered in a few days' worth of stubble, and when he looked at her, his eyes were a startling, piercing blue. They widened just a fraction, taking in her hollow cheeks, her weary expression, and the small, pathetic bundle of their belongings visible just inside the barn door. "You've been staying here?" he asked, his gaze soft but searching. "Just for the night," Josephine said, lifting her chin, forcing a strength she didn't feel. "We'll be gone within the hour." The man took off his hat, revealing a thick mane of dark brown hair. "No need for that, ma'am. I'm Blake Hartwell. This was my uncle's place before he passed. I just ride out every few weeks to check on it." "I'm sorry for your loss," Josephine said automatically, her body still coiled tight, ready to run. "We didn't damage anything." Blake's expression softened even more as his gaze fell on Emma, who was peeking out from behind Josephine with wide, curious eyes. He took in her clean but tattered dress, her little boots worn through at the toes. His blue eyes met Josephine's again, and they held a gentleness that was utterly disarming. "When's the last time you two had a proper meal?" Josephine stiffened. "We're fine, Mr. Hartwell." "Blake," he corrected her, "and I don't mean to offend, ma'am, but that little one looks hungry, and so do you." As if on cue, Emma tugged on her mother's skirt. "Mama, I am hungry," she whispered, her little voice cutting through Josephine's pride. A small smile touched Blake's lips. "My ranch is about 3 miles east of here. I've got a full pantry, and my housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, makes the best apple pie in the entire territory. You're welcome to join me for supper." Every instinct screamed at Josephine to say no, to grab her daughter and their things and just run. Trusting strangers was a mistake she had made before, and the price had been devastating. But when she looked down at Emma's pale, thin face, at the hopeful light in her daughter's eyes, the refusal died on her lips. Her own stomach growled in agreement. "We don't accept charity, Mr. Hartwell," she said, her voice firm. Blake nodded, his expression understanding. "It's not charity. Call it payment for keeping an eye on my uncle's property." He looked from her to Emma. "What's your name, if you don't mind my asking?" "Josephine Turner, and this is my daughter, Emma." "Pleased to meet you both," Blake said, crouching down to Emma's level. "How old are you, Miss Emma?" "I'm 5, Emma said, holding up 5 small fingers. "And a half." Blake chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. 5 and a half is a very important age. He straightened up, his gaze returning to Josephine. "What brings you to these parts, Mrs. Turner?" Josephine tensed. "Just passing through." Blake seemed to sense her discomfort and didn't push. "Well, my offer stands. A hot meal at the ranch. You can wash up, get a good night's sleep in a real bed. You can be on your way in the morning if that's what you want." A real bed. A hot meal. The words were a siren's call, promising a level of comfort she and Emma hadn't known in months. She looked down at her daughter, and Emma's hopeful expression broke through the last of her resistance. "We'd be much obliged, Mr. Hartwell," she finally said, "but just for tonight." Blake's smile was genuine, reaching all the way to his startling blue eyes. "That's settled then. Let me help you with your things." In moments, he had their small bundle tied behind his saddle. He lifted Emma up onto the horse as if she weighed nothing at all, then offered his hand to Josephine. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then allowed him to help her up, settling in behind her daughter. He mounted up behind them, his arms coming around her to take the reins, creating a secure circle around them both. The unexpected closeness, the solid feel of his chest against her back, made her stiffen. But Emma just leaned back against him, completely at ease. As they rode away from the abandoned barn, a cold knot of dread tightened in Josephine's stomach. She was making a mistake. She knew it. Trusting a kind stranger had nearly gotten her killed once before. But as Emma's small body relaxed against hers, warm and safe for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Josephine allowed a tiny, dangerous flicker of hope to ignite in her heart. Just one night, she told herself. One night of safety. Then they would be gone. But what Josephine couldn't possibly know was that this was no simple cowboy. And this one night would unravel everything she thought she knew about survival, about trust, and about the man who had just found them. This one night was the beginning of the end of her running. The Hartwell Ranch wasn't just a ranch. It was a kingdom. As they crested a hill, the valley opened up below them, and Josephine's breath caught in her throat. A sprawling 2-story main house stood like a fortress, surrounded by immaculate outbuildings, barns, and stables. A massive corral held dozens of horses, and in the distance, hundreds of cattle grazed on rolling green hillsides that stretched as far as the eye could see. This wasn't the humble homestead of a simple cowboy. This was the seat of an empire. "Welcome to Willow Creek Ranch," Blake said, his voice casual, as if he weren't the lord of all he surveyed. "Been in my family for nearly 20 years. Josephine said nothing. Her mind was reeling. The man who had found them wasn't some struggling cowhand. He was a wealthy, powerful rancher. And in this part of the country, wealth was power. She had made a terrible, terrible mistake. Accepting his invitation felt less like an act of charity and more like walking into a gilded cage. As they rode into the main yard, a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun bustled out of the house, wiping her hands on an apron. Her face, round and kind, broke into a wide smile when she saw Blake. "There you are, Mr. Hartwell. I was beginning to worry." Her smile faltered as her eyes landed on Josephine and Emma. Her gaze swept over them, taking in their travel-worn clothes, their exhausted faces. To Josephine's surprise, there was no judgment in the woman's eyes, only a warm curiosity. Blake dismounted, lifting Emma down first, then offering a hand to Josephine. "Mrs. Abernathy, this is Mrs. Turner and her daughter, Emma. They'll be our guests for the night." "Well, you're just in time for supper," Mrs. Abernathy said, her smile returning. "I've made a pot roast that could feed an army." "They'll need rooms prepared," Blake said, handing the reins to a young stable hand who had materialized at his side. "Already ahead of you," the housekeeper replied with a knowing look. "The blue room and the small adjoining room are always ready for guests." She winked at Emma. "And I do believe there might be some freshly baked cookies in the kitchen, if your mother approves." Emma looked up at Josephine, her eyes wide and pleading. Josephine nodded, and a radiant smile broke across her daughter's face. "Come along, dear," Mrs. Abernathy said, taking Emma's hand. "Let's get you that cookie while your mother and Mr. Hartwell get settled." As the housekeeper led Emma toward the house, her small hand swallowed up in the woman's capable one. Blake turned to Josephine. "Mrs. Abernathy has been with my family since I was a boy. She practically raised me after my mother passed." "She seems kind," Josephine said, but her mind was racing. Everything here was too perfect. The sprawling ranch, the efficient housekeeper, the kind, handsome owner. It felt like a trap. "She's the kindest person I know," Blake said. "Now let me show you to your room." The inside of the house was just as impressive as the outside. Polished wood floors gleamed, and comfortable, expensive furniture was arranged with tasteful precision. It spoke of old money, of established power. Blake led her up a wide staircase to a spacious bedroom decorated in shades of blue and cream. "This will be your room," he said, placing her small bundle on a delicate chair. "Emma can have the connecting room through there." Josephine walked to the window and looked out. From this vantage point she could see the full extent of his holdings, the creek winding through the property, the endless pastures, the mountains rising in the distance. It was breathtaking and terrifying. "It's beautiful," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It is," Blake agreed, coming to stand beside her. The scent of leather and open air clung to him. "My father built this place from nothing. Came west with nothing but a dream." Josephine turned to look at him. "You must be very proud." "I am," he said. His blue eyes seemed to look right through her. "Though I never expected to be running it alone. My brother was supposed to share the load, but—" He trailed off, a shadow passing over his handsome face. A flicker of pain, quickly suppressed. "Well, that's a story for another time." An awkward silence stretched between them. A secret hung in the air. Blake cleared his throat. "There's a washroom down the hall. Hot water. Mrs. Abernathy will have left towels for you." He paused at the door. "You're being very kind to strangers, Mr. Hartwell." His gaze met hers, and it was intense, unwavering. My father taught me that a man's worth is measured by how he treats those in need, not by his land or his money. Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Blake said simply. "I'll leave you to settle in. Supper is in an hour." As the door clicked shut behind him, Josephine sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was unbelievably soft. For a moment, she let herself imagine it. A life here. A life of safety, of comfort. A life where she didn't have to look over her shoulder every second of every day. But the thought was a poison. The past always found you. And she had been running for a very, very long time. She rose and began to unpack their few possessions. A worn rag doll, a small wooden horse, a single book of fairy tales. These were the only treasures they had left in the world. She changed into her only other dress, just as worn and faded as the first. Looking in the mirror, she saw a ghost staring back at her. A thin, haunted woman with dark circles under her eyes. She was only 26, but she felt 100 years old. A soft knock startled her. It was Mrs. Abernathy, with Emma in tow. Her daughter had a chocolate smudge on her cheek and a smile that lit up the room. "I thought you might want to get this little one cleaned up for supper," the housekeeper said, carrying a large pitcher of steaming water. As she poured it into the wash basin, she hesitated. "Mrs. Turner, I hope you don't think me forward, but I noticed your daughter's dress is quite worn. I have some beautiful fabric. I'm quite handy with a needle, if you'd permit me." Josephine's pride warred with the practical need. Emma's dress was practically rags. "That's very generous," she said finally. "I'd be happy to pay you for the fabric and your time." Mrs. Abernathy waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. Consider it a welcome gift." Before Josephine could protest again, she was gone. Another kindness, another thread in the web that was slowly being woven around them. "Mama, this house is like a castle," Emma whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "And Mrs. Abernathy gave me 2 cookies." Josephine knelt and began to wash her daughter's face. "Did you remember your manners?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I said thank you. And Mr. Blake has horses, Mama. Lots of them. He said maybe tomorrow I could see the baby one." "We might not be here tomorrow, Emma," Josephine reminded her gently. "Remember, we're just passing through." Emma's face fell. "But I like it here. And Mr. Blake has nice eyes. They crinkle when he smiles, like Papa's used to." The innocent words were like a knife to Josephine's heart. Emma rarely spoke of her father. Josephine had hoped the memories were fading, but they were still there, lurking beneath the surface. Her husband had crinkling eyes too, and a smile that could charm the birds from the trees, and hands that could break a woman's bones without a second thought. As she dressed Emma for supper, she couldn't shake the image of Blake Hartwell's kind, crinkling eyes. Was it possible? Could he be different? Or was this just another beautiful mask hiding another monster? The thought was a dangerous one. They would eat. They would sleep in the soft, comfortable beds. And in the morning, they would run. They had to. Before the kindness of Blake Hartwell became a cage she could no longer escape. But as they walked downstairs, following the scent of roasting meat and baking bread, she had a sinking feeling that leaving this place was going to be much harder than she had ever imagined. The dining room was a trap of warmth and comfort. A grand chandelier cast a soft, golden glow over a long, polished oak table. Blake stood as they entered, his presence filling the room. He pulled out a chair for Josephine, then a smaller one for Emma, his movements fluid and confident. "I hope you're hungry," he said, his blue eyes twinkling. "Mrs. Abernathy believes in feeding people until they can't move." "I heard that, Mr. Hartwell," the housekeeper called from the kitchen, bustling in with a massive platter of pot roast. and no one has ever complained about leaving my table hungry. Blake winked at Emma, who giggled. That's because they're too full to speak, he stage whispered. The easy, affectionate banter between them was like something out of a storybook. It felt like family. It felt real. And that's what made it so dangerous. As Mrs. Abernathy laid out dish after dish, fresh bread, creamy butter, green beans glistening with bacon, Josephine felt a sense of unreality wash over her. Just yesterday, they had been sharing a stale crust of bread in a cold, damp barn. Now they were seated at a king's table. Blake bowed his head. If you'll permit me, I'd like to say grace. Josephine nodded, and Emma dutifully folded her small hands. Lord, we thank you for this food, and for bringing Mrs. Turner and Emma safely to our table tonight. Bless this meal, and those who share it. Amen. Amen, Emma whispered. The meal was a blur of delicious flavors and easy conversation. Blake served Emma himself, making sure she got extra carrots. Josephine watched her daughter eat with a ravenous hunger she hadn't seen in weeks, and a painful knot in her own chest began to loosen. For this one moment, her child was safe and full. So, Mrs. Turner, Blake said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Where are you and Emma headed? Josephine took a sip of water, her mind scrambling for the familiar lie. West, she said. We have family in California. The lie slid off her tongue easily, polished by months of practice. California is a long way off, Blake observed, especially for a woman and child traveling alone. We manage, Josephine said, her tone clipped, a clear signal to drop the subject. To his credit, he did. Well, you're welcome to rest here as long as you need. The stagecoach comes through Pinehurst twice a week. It would be a safer way to travel. That's very kind, Josephine said firmly. But we'll be moving on tomorrow. A flicker of something, disappointment, crossed his face, but he just nodded. Of course, whatever you think is best. The conversation shifted to safer topics, the weather, the town, a new schoolhouse being built. But Josephine felt his eyes on her, questioning, probing. He knew she was lying. He knew she was running. But he didn't push. He just watched. Soon, Emma began to droop in her chair, her small body finally succumbing to exhaustion. I think someone's ready for bed, Mrs. Abernathy said with a warm smile. The meal was wonderful, Mrs. Abernathy, Josephine said, rising from her chair and lifting her sleeping daughter into her arms. And thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Hartwell. Blake, he reminded her, his voice a low rumble. And it's my pleasure. As Josephine carried Emma up the grand staircase, she could feel his gaze on her back. It was a heavy, palpable thing. There was more than just kindness in his eyes. There was curiosity, concern, and something else. Something possessive and protective that made her skin prickle. It wasn't fear she felt. It was something far more complicated and far more dangerous. In the quiet of the blue room, she tucked her daughter into the small bed. Emma was asleep before her head hit the pillow. Josephine sat on the edge of her own massive bed, the silence of the big house pressing in on her. She listened to her daughter's soft, even breathing. This was what she was fighting for, this peace, this safety. But this place was a fantasy, a beautiful, tempting lie. They had to leave in the morning. Before Blake Hartwell and his disarming kindness could shatter the walls she had so carefully built around her heart, before she started to believe the lie was real. With a heavy sigh, she rose and prepared for bed, her mind made up. They would be gone before the sun came up. It was the only way. It was safer for everyone. But as she drifted off to sleep in the softest bed she had ever known, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't running towards safety anymore. She was running away from it. A sharp knock on the door jolted Josephine from a deep, dreamless sleep. She sat up, disoriented, the unfamiliar luxury of the room momentarily confusing her. The ranch. Blake Hartwell. The knock came again, more insistent. "Mrs. Turner, it's Mrs. Abernathy. I've brought you some coffee." Josephine glanced at the window. The sky was just beginning to lighten. Dawn. She had overslept. She never overslept. "Just a moment," she called, scrambling into her dress. When she opened the door, the housekeeper stood there with a silver tray. A steaming coffee pot, a delicate cup, a pitcher of hot water. "Good morning, dear. I thought you might appreciate a quiet moment before the day begins." Her plan to sneak away before dawn was in tatters. "Thank you," she said, accepting the tray. "What time is it?" "Just past 5:30, Mrs. Abernathy replied cheerfully. "Mr. Hartwell has been out with the hands for an hour already. A calf was born during the night. He asked me to tell you breakfast will be at 7. "That's very kind, but we really should be on our way." The housekeeper's smile faltered. "Oh, but I was so hoping you'd stay, at least for the day. Mr. Hartwell was planning to take Emma to see the new foal, and I've already cut the fabric for her dress." The words were a gentle, loving vice, tightening around Josephine's resolve. Every kindness was another bar on the cage. Before she could form a protest, Emma stirred. "Mama!" she called from the next room. She appeared in the doorway, clutching her rag doll, her hair a wild tangle. Her face lit up when she saw Mrs. Abernathy. "Good morning. Is it time to see the baby horse?" The housekeeper chuckled. "Not quite yet, Miss Emma. First breakfast, and I thought you might like to help me make flapjacks this morning." Emma's eyes went wide. "Can I, Mama? Please." Josephine was trapped, caught between her daughter's desperate need for a normal childhood and her own desperate need to run. I suppose we could stay for breakfast," she conceded. "Wonderful," Mrs. Abernathy beamed. "Emma, you get dressed and meet me downstairs. I'll show you how it's done." As she helped Emma into her patched dress, Josephine's mind raced. One more meal. What harm could it do? They would eat, say a proper goodbye, and then they would be on their way. "Mama, I like it here," Emma said, her small voice serious. "It's like the houses in my storybooks." "It is very nice," Josephine agreed, her fingers smoothing Emma's hair. "But we can't stay. We have to get to California." Emma's lower lip jutted out. "But Mr. Blake said there are no dragons in California." Josephine had to hide a smile. "I'm sure we can find some." She had never been to California. She had no family there. California was just a direction, a name for a place as far away from Kentucky as she could get. Downstairs, the kitchen was filled with the scent of coffee and bacon. Emma stood on a chair by the stove, a comically large apron tied around her, her face a mask of concentration, as Mrs. Abernathy showed her how to pour batter onto a hot griddle. The scene was so painfully domestic, so achingly normal, that Josephine felt a lump form in her throat. This was the life that had been stolen from them. The back door swung open, and Blake Hartwell strode in, bringing the crisp morning air with him. "Something smells good," he said, his eyes immediately finding Josephine's. A slow smile spread across his face, making the corners of his eyes crinkle. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner. I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling plain and shabby in his magnificent kitchen. He crossed to the stove and peered over Emma's shoulder. "That looks perfect, Miss Emma. You're a natural." Emma beamed with pride. "After breakfast, can we see the baby horse?" "It's a promise," Blake said. "The little fella is doing just fine." He took a cup of coffee from Mrs. Abernathy. "Breakfast is in 10 minutes. Why don't you show Mrs. Turner the sunrise from the porch while we finish up?" Blake turned to Josephine. "Care to join me?" She hesitated. Getting closer to him was a mistake. But refusing seemed rude, and Emma was completely absorbed in her flapjack lesson. Just for a moment, she agreed. The air on the porch was cool and clean. The sun was just cresting the eastern hills, painting the sky in fiery strokes of pink and gold. Blake led her to a pair of rocking chairs. "My father built this porch just for this," he said, his voice low. "He said a man should start every day by appreciating the beauty of the world before getting down to the hard work of living in it." He was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee. Then he turned to her, his blue eyes serious, pinning her in place. "Which is why I hope you'll forgive my directness when I say that you and Emma are welcome to stay here for as long as you need." Josephine stiffened. "That's very kind, but as I said, we're leaving today." "May I ask why?" His voice was gentle, but the question was a steel trap. "It's clear you're running from something, or someone. I'm not asking for your story. I'm just offering you a safe place to catch your breath." "You don't know anything about me, Mr. Hartwell." "Blake," he corrected her again, his voice firm. "And I know enough. I know you're a good mother doing whatever it takes to protect your child. I know Emma is a bright, sweet girl who deserves a home. And I know that whatever you're running from has you so scared you can't see the future. You can only see the past." His perception was a physical blow. He saw too much. He saw everything. "We've managed on our own." "I don't doubt that," he said. "But everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in it." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Why would you help us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We're strangers." Blake stared out at the sunrise, his expression unreadable. "When I was a boy, my mother got sick. We were snowed in. A traveler, a man we'd never seen before, stayed for 3 days. He chopped wood, fetched medicine. He saved her life. When my father tried to pay him, the man refused. He said someone had once helped him, and he was just passing on the kindness." He turned back to her, his eyes burning with a conviction that shook her to her core. "Sometimes people help just because they can, and because they remember what it felt like to need it themselves." A lump formed in Josephine's throat. It had been so long since anyone had offered her anything without wanting something in return. She had forgotten that simple, selfless generosity even existed. "My situation, it's complicated," she managed to say. "I understand," he said. "But the offer stands. Leave today, stay a week, stay a year. It's your choice. But if you do leave, at least let me give you proper supplies for your journey." Before she could answer, Mrs. Abernathy called from the doorway. "Breakfast is ready, and Miss Emma is very proud of her flapjacks." Blake stood up, offering her his hand. It was warm and calloused, a hand that knew hard work. "Shall we? I hear your daughter is quite the cook." She hesitated for only a second before placing her hand in his. As they walked back into the house, a war raged inside her. He was offering her a sanctuary, a fortress, a place for Emma to finally be a child. But accepting his help meant trusting him. And trusting a man was the last thing on earth she was prepared to do. The past always catches up. And when it did, she couldn't let it destroy this good man and this beautiful place along with her, no matter how much she was starting to want to stay. Breakfast was a cheerful ordeal, a painful reminder of a normal life she couldn't have. Emma's flapjacks were, by Blake's solemn declaration, the best in Colorado. Mrs. Abernathy told embarrassing stories about Blake as a boy, how he used to hide frogs in his pockets. Emma giggled, completely enchanted. "Did you have a horse when you were little?" she asked him. "I did," Blake replied. "A stubborn pony named Patches. He taught me everything I know about patience." "I wish I had a pony," Emma said, her voice full of longing. Blake's eyes met Josephine's over Emma's head. "Well, speaking of horses, I believe I promised to show you our new foal." Emma's face lit up. "Can we go now? Please, Mama." Josephine felt the walls closing in. She had to leave. But the pleading in her daughter's eyes was a physical ache in her chest. "I suppose we could delay our departure for a little while." "Excellent," Blake said, pushing back his chair. "And while we're at the stables, Mrs. Abernathy has offered to start on that new dress for Emma." "It's no imposition," the housekeeper insisted, seeing the protest forming on Josephine's lips. "It's been years since I've had the pleasure of sewing for a little girl. Indulge an old woman. Trapped." Every direction she turned, another kindness blocked her path. "Thank you," she murmured. "We're very grateful." The stables were cool and smelled of hay and leather. In a stall at the far end, a chestnut mare stood guard over a wobbly-legged foal, the color of new copper. "This is Maple," Blake said softly, "and her son doesn't have a name yet." Emma pressed her face against the wood, her breath fogging the air. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "Look, Mama, he has white feet." "4 white socks," Blake confirmed. "That's considered lucky." He opened the stall door and spoke softly to the mare, who trusted him completely. He beckoned Emma inside. "Slowly, now. Let him get used to you." Josephine watched, her heart in her throat, as her daughter crept into the stall. The foal took a hesitant step toward her, sniffing her outstretched hand. Then he nudged her palm with his velvety nose. A smile of pure, unadulterated joy spread across Emma's face. "He likes me," she breathed. "He certainly does," Blake said, his own smile just as warm. He looked at Josephine. "Would you like to meet him?" Josephine shook her head. "I'm fine here." "Are you afraid of horses, Mama?" Emma asked. "Not afraid," she replied. "Just cautious." Blake studied her for a long moment. "Have you ridden before?" "A long time ago," she admitted. "Well," he said, his voice casual, "if you ever want to get reacquainted, Maple's sister, Willow, is the gentlest mount on the ranch." They spent nearly an hour in the stables, with Blake patiently answering Emma's endless stream of questions. When the foal finally tired and lay down for a nap, Blake guided Emma out of the stall. "Can we stay until he wakes up?" Emma pleaded. "Emma, we talked about this," Josephine said, guilt twisting in her gut. "We need to continue our journey." Her daughter's face crumpled. "But Mrs. Abernathy is making my dress, and I want to see the foal again." Blake cleared his throat, stepping in. "I have some business in town this afternoon. You're welcome to ride along. See Pinerist. It might give Mrs. Abernathy time to finish that dress. You could decide your travel plans after that." It was a perfectly reasonable suggestion, a trap laid with logic and kindness. Josephine felt her resolve crumbling. "I suppose that would be all right," she said, defeated. "It's settled then," Blake said with a smile that didn't quite hide his satisfaction. He tipped his hat. "Feel free to explore the ranch, Mrs. Turner. You're a guest here, not a prisoner." As he walked away, his words echoed in her mind. Not a prisoner. How ironic. She had felt like a prisoner for so long, a prisoner of fear, of circumstance, of a past that wouldn't let her go. And now she was in a place so beautiful, so safe, that it felt like the most dangerous prison of all, because a part of her never wanted to leave. In a small sewing room off the kitchen, Mrs. Abernathy was already cutting into a bolt of beautiful blue cotton. She set Emma to work sorting a large jar of buttons. As Josephine watched the housekeeper's skilled hands, a strange calm settled over her. "Mr. Blake mentioned you'll be going to town," Mrs. Abernathy said, not looking up from her work. "You should visit Harriet's mercantile. She has the most beautiful things." "We won't be staying long enough to need new things," Josephine said quietly. The scissors stopped. Mrs. Abernathy looked up, her gaze gentle but piercing. You know, Mrs. Turner, sometimes the things we're running from aren't as dangerous as the life we build by always being on the move. Josephine stiffened. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, the older woman said softly. I've seen that look before, in my own mirror, many years ago. She sent Emma to fetch a pincushion, and as soon as the child was out of earshot, she spoke again, her voice low and urgent. I left my first husband after 5 years of living in fear. I traveled halfway across the country with nothing but the clothes on my back and a promise to myself that I would never let another man make me feel worthless again. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Josephine was speechless. I'm not saying your situation is the same, Mrs. Abernathy continued, but I recognize the weariness, the constant looking over your shoulder, and I want you to know that there comes a time when you have to stop running. You have to stop running and start living again. Emma returned with the pincushion, and the moment was broken. But the housekeeper's words burned in Josephine's mind. Stop running and start living. Was that even possible? Could she ever have a normal life? The idea was a distant, beautiful star, something to wish on, but never to reach. Yet as she looked around the warm, sunlit room, at her daughter happily sorting buttons, at this kind woman who saw so much, a tiny, rebellious thought took root. Maybe, just maybe, here at Willow Creek Ranch she could. And that thought was the most terrifying one of all. Pinehurst wasn't a town, it was a picture postcard. Neat houses with tidy gardens, a main street bustling with activity, a church with a proud white steeple. As Blake drove the wagon, with Emma sitting happily between them, Josephine felt like she had stepped into another world. A world where women shopped without looking over their shoulders, where children played freely in the streets. A world she had forgotten could exist. Blake pulled up in front of Harriet's Dry Goods and General Merchandise. Mrs. Abernathy has a list for me, he said. Thought you ladies might like to browse while I see to my other business. Harriet keeps a fine selection of everything from fabric to hard candy. Emma's eyes went wide at the mention of candy. Blake pressed a few coins into her hand. Choose something for you and your mama, he said. And before Josephine could protest, he tipped his hat and strode across the street to the bank. The mercantile was a treasure trove. Shelves overflowed with goods, and the air smelled of coffee, leather, and spices. A plump, cheerful woman with graying hair bustled forward. Good afternoon. I'm Harriet. How can I help you? Mr. Hartwell brought us, Emma announced, and he gave me money for candy. Harriet's eyebrows shot up. Her curious gaze landed on Josephine. You must be staying at Willow Creek. Blake doesn't bring many visitors to town. Just passing through, Josephine said quickly. I see, Harriet replied, her tone suggesting she saw a great deal more. While Emma agonized over her choice of sweets, Josephine found herself drawn to the bolts of fabric. A soft green calico caught her eye, the color of the meadows at the ranch. She imagined a new dress, something pretty and practical. That would suit you beautifully, Harriet said, appearing at her elbow. Brings out the green in your eyes. Josephine stepped back as if burned. It's lovely, but not something I need. Harriet gave her a shrewd look. Sometimes what we need and what we deserve are two different things, my dear. Blake Hartwell is a good man, the best in these parts. She paused, her voice softening. It's good to see him bring someone to town, since the accident. He's kept to himself. His brother, Josephine asked, her curiosity piqued. Harriet's face grew solemn. Benjamin died in a mining accident 3 years ago, just before he was to be married. It hit Blake hard. They were very close. Before she could say more, the door opened and Blake himself walked in. Found everything you need? He asked, his smile easy. I was just telling Mrs. Turner what a fine, upstanding citizen you are, Harriet said with a wink. Blake chuckled. I'm sure. He turned to Josephine, his expression more serious. I finished my business. I also spoke with the stage office. There's a coach heading west on Thursday, if you're still determined to leave. Thursday. 3 days away. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. It was an escape hatch, an exit strategy. But the thought of leaving now sent a pang of regret through her that was sharp and unexpected. Emma ran up, clutching a small paper bag. I got peppermint sticks, and I got you a present, Mama. She held out a small pouch of lavender. Touched, Josephine knelt to hug her. Thank you, sweetheart. A fine choice, Blake said, his eyes warm. Your mama deserves nice things. As Harriet wrapped their supplies, she chatted with Blake. You should bring Mrs. Turner and Emma to the Harvest Festival, she said. It's this Saturday. There's a dance, games. It's always a fine time. A fine idea, Blake agreed, glancing at Josephine. Saturday, 5 days away. Another delay. Another reason to stay. We'll see, was all Josephine could manage. After they left the store, Blake took them to see the new schoolhouse being built at the edge of town. The town's been saving for years for this, he said proudly. Men working on the structure called out greetings to him. Will there be lots of children here? Emma asked. About 20, Blake replied. I've never been to school, Emma said matter-of-factly. Mama teaches me my letters. Blake looked at Josephine, a question in his eyes. We've moved too often, she explained, the words tasting like ash. As they walked through Pinarest, Josephine saw the deep respect the townspeople had for Blake. He wasn't just a rancher, he was their leader, their benefactor. He was the heart of this community. Their last stop was the telegraph office. While Blake was inside, Josephine stood on the boardwalk, watching the life of the town swirl around her. Women laughing, children playing, an elderly couple walking arm in arm. It was a life of connection, of belonging. A life she desperately wanted for Emma. A life she was terrified to even dream of for herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly consider it. What if they stopped running? What if they stayed? Ready to head back? Blake asked, emerging from the office. As they rode back toward the ranch, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the valley, Josephine found herself studying his profile. The strong jaw, the kind eyes. He was nothing like Thomas Willis, the monster she had married. But she had been wrong before, disastrously wrong. Yet, as the wagon crested a hill and Willow Creek Ranch came into view, bathed in the afternoon light, it looked like a promise. It looked like home. And Josephine couldn't suppress the tiny flutter of hope in her chest. Maybe this time could be different. Maybe they could stay. Until Thursday, at least. Or maybe even until Saturday. Maybe just for a little while, they could pretend this was where they belonged. When they arrived back at the ranch, Mrs. Abernathy was on the porch, beaming. Perfect timing. Emma's dress is finished. Emma, who had been dozing, shot upright. My new dress, she squealed, scrambling from the wagon. As she rushed to the housekeeper, Blake turned to Josephine, helping her down. His hand was warm and strong. Mrs. Abernathy has been working on that since we left. I don't think she stopped for lunch. Everyone has been too kind, Josephine said, quickly pulling her hand away. Considering we're strangers. Blake's expression grew serious. Not strangers anymore, Mrs. Turner. Guests. There's a difference. Before she could process that, Emma called from the house. Mama, come see. It's the prettiest dress ever. In the sitting room, the dress was laid out on the sofa. The simple blue cotton had been transformed into a beautiful garment, with a Peter Pan collar and puffed sleeves. It was made with love. It's lovely, Josephine said, her voice thick with emotion. You've done too much. Nonsense, the housekeeper waved away her thanks. In Josephine's room, Emma tried on the dress. It fit perfectly. You look beautiful, sweetheart, Josephine said, a lump in her throat. Can I wear it to supper? Emma asked, twirling so the skirt flared out. Of course, Mrs. Abernathy said. And speaking of supper, I'm making chicken and dumplings, Mr. Blake's favorite. After she left, a soft knock came at the door. It was Blake. Mrs. Abernathy said the dress was a success, he said, his hat in his hands. I wanted to see for myself. Emma turned from the mirror, her face radiant. Look, Mr. Blake, isn't it pretty? His expression softened. Well, Miss Emma, I believe you are the most elegant young lady in all of Colorado. He looked from the beaming child to her mother, and there was something unreadable in his eyes. It suits her perfectly. Yes, Josephine agreed. We're very grateful. I'll let you ladies prepare for dinner, he said, backing toward the door. Oh, and Mrs. Turner, I've left something outside your door for you. No obligation, of course. He was gone before she could ask. Puzzled, she opened the door. Leaning against the wall was a package wrapped in brown paper. She brought it inside and unwrapped it. It was the bolt of green calico she had admired in Harriet's store. What's that, Mama? Emma asked. It's fabric, Josephine said, her fingers tracing the soft material. For a dress for you? Emma's eyes were wide. It's the color of your eyes. The gesture was too much, too generous, too personal. A dress for Emma was one thing, a kindness to a child. But this was for her. This was a statement. It was a move in a game she didn't know how to play. Her heart began to race. Are you going to make a new dress, Mama? Emma asked. I'm not sure, Josephine said. We can't accept such an expensive gift. Emma frowned. Why not? He wants you to have it, and your old dress has 3 patches. Out of the mouths of babes, her dress did have patches, carefully hidden. But of course, Emma had noticed. Everything Blake Hartwell was doing felt like a systematic replacement of their old, broken life. He was giving them new clothes, new food, new hope. He was rebuilding them. But was she ready to be rebuilt? And what would he expect in return? That night at supper, Blake had invited his foreman, a weathered cowboy named Samuel, to join them. The conversation was easy and pleasant. Blake spoke of his desire to maintain good relations with the local Ute and Arapaho tribes, a view so different from the hostile attitudes Josephine had encountered elsewhere. He was a good man, a just man. Everything about him seemed to scream it. The talk turned to the Harvest Festival. There's a dance in the town square, Mrs. Abernathy said. Do you dance, Mr. Blake? Emma asked. Blake chuckled. When properly motivated. I bet you dance beautifully, Emma declared. Mama dances beautifully. Papa used to say she moved like a fairy. A dead silence fell over the table. The mention of Emma's father was like a ghost appearing in the room. Josephine's hand tightened around her fork. Blake recovered first. I'm sure your mother is an excellent dancer, he said, his gaze tactful. Perhaps she'll honor me with a dance at the festival. Oh yes, Mama. Emma clapped her hands. You must dance with Mr. Blake. We'll see, Josephine said, the words feeling thin and weak. After dinner, once a sleepy Emma was tucked into bed, Josephine saw Blake sitting on the porch, a lone figure in the rocking chair, staring out into the darkness. He was waiting. For her. Against her better judgment, she found herself walking downstairs, her feet carrying her out into the cool night air. He rose as she approached. I was hoping you might join me. Thank you, she said, taking the other chair. And thank you for the fabric. It's beautiful. But I can't accept it. Emma has a new dress, he said simply. It only seemed fair that you should have one too. Fair has nothing to do with it, she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. You've done too much for us already. I can't be beholden to you. There is no debt between friends, Mrs. Turner. We are not friends, she said quickly. We are strangers. Blake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his face serious in the dim light from the window. May I speak plainly? She nodded, bracing herself. I know you're running, he said, his voice low and steady. And I can see that you're tired. Tired of running. Tired of looking over your shoulder. Tired of denying your daughter the stability every child deserves. I'm offering you a safe place to rest, for as long as you need. No expectations, no obligations. Why? She whispered, the question torn from her. Why are you doing this? He looked at her, his blue eyes seeming to see straight into her soul. Because when I look at you and Emma, I see two people who deserve better, because my father taught me that true wealth is what you can give away. And he hesitated, his voice dropping even lower. And because, in the short time you've been here, this house has felt more like a home than it has in years. His raw honesty stole her breath. Just then, Mrs. Abernathy appeared with coffee and apple pie, breaking the spell. They ate in a charged silence. When the housekeeper was gone, Josephine knew she had to make a choice, to keep running or to take a terrifying leap of faith. We might stay until Thursday, she said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. If your offer still stands. A slow smile spread across Blake's face, transforming him. It absolutely does. And what about the festival on Saturday? One step at a time, Mr. Hartwell. Blake, he corrected her. He leaned forward again. And I'm convinced you deserve that fabric, Mrs. Turner, just as I'm convinced you and Emma deserve a place where you can feel safe. He paused, and then he said the one word that changed everything. You're welcome, Josephine. Her name. The sound of it in his deep voice was more intimate than a touch. It was a claim, a promise, and it terrified her more than anything had in a long time. That night, for the first time in months, Josephine dreamed of something other than running. She dreamed of a house filled with laughter, of a little girl in a blue dress, and of a man with kind, crinkling eyes who called her by her name. The next morning, Josephine made a decision. She unwrapped the green fabric. Will you make a new dress, Mama? Emma asked. Yes, Josephine said, the word feeling like both a surrender and a victory. I think I will. Blake was out on the range all day, dealing with a broken fence line. Josephine and Mrs. Abernathy spent the afternoon in the sewing room, cutting and pinning the green calico. As they worked, the housekeeper spoke more of her past, of the courage it took to leave a bad situation. Sometimes, she said, her needle flashing, what seems like the safest choice, to keep moving, to trust no one, can become its own kind of prison. There comes a time when you have to risk trusting again, or you risk losing the very things that make life worth living. When Blake returned, dusty and tired, he proposed a ride. I want to show you the view from the North Ridge, he said. The thought of riding was intimidating, but Emma's pleading eyes won out. Blake put Emma on his powerful horse, Thunder, and helped Josephine onto the gentle mare, Willow. As they rode out from the ranch, up into the hills, a feeling of freedom washed over Josephine. The wind in her hair, the open sky above, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her. It was a feeling she had long forgotten. Blake was a patient teacher, both with her riding and with Emma's endless questions about the natural world. He pointed out hawks and wildflowers, his knowledge of the land deep and respectful. He treated Emma not as a child to be placated, but as a person to be engaged. He was, she realized with a painful lurch of her heart, everything a father should be. everything Thomas Willis was not. The view from the ridge was breathtaking. The entire valley spread out below them, a patchwork of green and gold. "This is my thinking spot," Blake told her. "When things get overwhelming, I come up here to get some perspective." They sat on a blanket, sharing apples and cheese, while Emma searched for interesting rocks. They talked. He asked about her past, and she told him about her father, the doctor in Kentucky. He told her more about his brother, Benjamin, and how after his death, his father had died of a broken heart. "I almost sold the ranch and left," he admitted. "But I realized that running away wouldn't diminish the pain. It would only mean leaving behind everything that mattered to the people I'd lost." He looked at her, his gaze direct and meaningful. "We can't outrun our past, Josephine. Sooner or later, we have to make peace with it." His words hit her with the force of a physical blow. He was challenging her. He was challenging everything she had done for the last 6 months. As the sun began to set, they rode back down toward the ranch. As they neared the yard, Josephine noticed a doctor's buggy parked by the house. "Are you expecting visitors?" she asked. Blake frowned. "No, that's Dr. Wilson's buggy. I hope no one's ill." They dismounted quickly. Mrs. Abernathy was waiting on the porch, her face pale and worried. "There you are, Dr. Wilson is here. There's been an accident in town, but he also brought news." Her eyes flickered to Josephine. "A man has been asking questions in town, a stranger, well-dressed, with a southern accent. He was asking about a woman and a child, traveling alone." The world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from Josephine's face, and a cold, familiar terror seized her. It couldn't be. Not here. Not now. Blake's hand was instantly at the small of her back, steadying her. "Did this man give his name?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "He said he was a relative," Mrs. Abernathy replied, her eyes full of pity. "Looking for his sister-in-law and his niece. He told Harriet at the mercantile he was worried for their welfare." "Mama?" Emma's voice was a small, frightened squeak. "What's wrong?" Josephine forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "Nothing, sweetheart. Go with Mrs. Abernathy and wash up for supper." As soon as they were inside, she turned to Blake, her voice shaking. "We have to leave. Tonight. Now." His expression was grim. "Is this man dangerous, Josephine?" She could only nod, tears choking her. "Yes, very." "Then you're safer here than on the road," he said firmly. "This ranch is remote. My men are loyal. No one will find you here." "You don't understand," she cried, the words tearing from her throat. "He will never stop looking, and when he finds us, he'll take Emma, or worse." Blake stepped forward, his hands coming up to cup her face, his touch gentle but firm, forcing her to look at him. "Tell me who he is, Josephine," he said, his voice a low, urgent command. "Let me help you. Let me protect you." The moment stretched, thick with fear and the terrifying possibility of trust. She had carried this secret, this burden, alone for so long. To speak it aloud felt like a betrayal, a surrender. But as she looked into Blake's steady, determined blue eyes, she saw the one thing she had given up on ever finding again. True safety. Not just a hiding place, but a fortress. A man who would stand and fight. She took a ragged breath, the words catching in her throat. "His name," she whispered, the secret finally breaking free, "is Thomas Willis." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading for him to understand the horror of her next words. "He's Emma's father, and he is my husband." If you are on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button, because the storm has just arrived at Willow Creek, and the story is far from over.